Material needs. When there are legitimate material needs among believers that cannot be met by family members, as a church we are to assist in meeting these needs. Here's Gene.
Paul gives some guidelines, really basically two guidelines. Here's the first guideline. If possible, family members were to care for their own widows, not the church. And so he addresses that in various portions of chapter 5. Verse 4, he says, if any widow has children or grandchildren, they should learn to practice their religion towards their own family first and repay their parents, for this pleases God. In other words, take care of people. Don't burden the church. You do this as children and grandchildren. Now, if anyone does not provide for his own relatives, Paul says, especially for his household, he's denied the faith, is worse than an unbeliever. Paul didn't mince words on that one. In other words, don't take advantage of other believers to take care of your own. In 5:16, and I'm not quite sure what he means here, but he says, if any believing woman has widows, which probably means that he's talking about a woman, a believing woman who has a mother and perhaps a grandmother, or who has the wife of her husband, a mother-in-law or a grandmother-in-law. He was probably dealing with wealthy women, like Lydia, for example, who certainly would not have violated this principle. Or Mary, the mother of Mark, who was a very wealthy woman in Jerusalem. He's talking to women. Evidently, that was a unique problem there in Ephesus. And he says, if any believing woman has widows, she should help them. The church should not be burdened so that it can help those who are genuinely widows, which leads now to the next guideline. And that is, if this was not possible, only older qualified widows should be supported by the church. He's dealing now with a situation there in Ephesus. And so he gets very specific. Support widows who are genuinely widows. Well, how do you know they're genuinely widows? Well, he goes on. He explains this. No widow should be placed on the official support list unless she's at least 60 years old. He gets very specific about it. Has been the wife of one husband, has been morally pure, and is well known for good works. And he sets a very high standard. She's brought up children. She's shown hospitality. She's washed the saints' feet in terms of servanthood, helped the afflicted, devoted herself to every good work. And so here he really is dealing with what it really means to support somebody who's truly a widow who is deserving. And he sets a very high standard. Now, this leads to a question. What are some specific ways in our own cultural situation in which a church can determine the true material needs among believers and how these needs should be met? And I developed that at length last time in terms of especially meeting the needs of people who have needs. This is dealing primarily with women, older women. It certainly could apply to older men as well. But basically, the guideline that just comes right to the surface here is family first. As a family, we have a responsibility for those who are in need, particularly our parents, our grandparents, and it's family first. And I think it works both ways. I think there are those in our culture where we are responsible to take care and help our children when they get into financial situations for one reason or another, and we're capable of doing that. We shouldn't burden the church. It's a family affair. And so Paul really gives us a guideline there that's very, very important. Now, I think in our own cultural situation, we need to understand that we have benefits in our culture that were not true in the New Testament culture. For example, in Jerusalem, when the widows came to Christ, they were cut off from the Jewish system. There was plenty of money in the coffers in Jerusalem, in the temple. But the believers weren't going to get access to it whatsoever. So it created some specific needs in relationship to the family situation. And so we have cultural differences. Let me just illustrate a cultural difference. For example, when Elaine's mother, when she went into a nursing home, and she had needs to be cared for. She was up in years. She worked into her 70s and finally wasn't able to work anymore because she was too old. They wouldn't hire her. And as she got older, she we needed to put her in a nursing home. She no longer could take care of herself. So he went into this residential area. Elaine's sister took her in, and they filled out some forms. And one of the questions that related to that form was her husband, who, and Elaine's dad, had passed away earlier, was he ever in the armed services? Well, yes. First World War. Was he ever injured in the armed services? Well, yes, he was. He was gassed by the Germans in the Battle of the Argonne Woods. And it affected him the rest of his life. He was a veteran. He's no longer living. And she said, your mother is entitled to benefits from the United States government, from the First World War. And the amazing thing that came out of that was her Social Security and the benefits from the government paid all of her bills until she died. Now, we were prepared as a family to take care of her. We had never gone to the church. All the children on both sides and grandchildren, we were going to take care of Elaine's mother. But the fact of the matter is, her needs were met. Now, that's a totally different cultural situation. And we have those variances within our culture, and obviously we need to take that into consideration. However, if there is a true need, and there are true needs, that's when the church needs to get involved. And that is a very, very important principle that we need to apply. Discretionally, but we need to apply that principle. And it even goes beyond our own church, because there are places in the world where widows cannot take care of themselves, and even the church cannot take care of them, because the churches are so poor they can hardly take care of themselves. And that's why I'm excited about the Ethiopian Project and be able to help widows who are truly widows indeed here in Plano, Texas, to be able to help other people in other parts of the world.